Live from the European Parliament in Strasbourg, this is Raw Politics. Thank you for joining us tonight as we launch our special coverage of the European elections. And here's what we have coming up for you. 100 days and counting. We dive into the raw data and tell you the themes that could dominate the campaign and define Europe. Skeptics rising. Will a populist wave sweep through the European Parliament? And will the right finally unite? Weber's vision. In an exclusive interview, the man who could next lead the EU Commission hits back at populists in Europe. First-timers, we talk to Europeans voting for the first time to find out what is motivating them. And political pitch, why Parliament is joining forces with footballers to get more people to the polls. Welcome to the show. Now, May 23rd. Circle that on your calendar. In precisely 100 days, voters across Europe will make a choice in what's expected to be a pivotal moment. Because voters won't just be electing their MEPs, they'll be defining what Europe stands for and deciding its future direction. Now, we have special coverage over the next hour tonight, but let us start this evening by taking a look at exactly what is at stake. Here's our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, with your campaign compass.
From Oslo to Valletta, from Dublin to Athens. In just 100 days' time, tens of millions of Europeans will elect their MEPs. MEPs that will represent 450 million people in 27 different countries, representing them in Brussels and here in Strasbourg. The question is, will this time be any different? Well, yes, in the fact that the UK is due to leave, we think. And that means that the number of MEPs will reduce in size from 751 to 705. But some countries will see an increase in representation, like France, for example, who will nab some of Britain's seats. But will people turn out to vote? Well, turnout in 2009 and 14 wasn't great at, 43%, and that is why the EU is making a concerted campaign this time. They've got a slogan that says it's just not enough to hope for a better future. This time we all need to take responsibility for it. Will it work? I'm not sure. But the question is, of course, what are the key issues that will decide this election? 2019 is likely to see a raft of new parties and indeed political groupings inside the European Parliament. And while EU elections are always as much about national politics as they are about European politics, there are three issues that voters say concern them. And they are migration, the economy, and youth unemployment. All in all, Europe, its politics, and this place could look very different in just 100 days' time.
And here to talk about how different Parliament could look in just over 100 days, we are joined by the Commission's chief spokesperson, Margarita Skinas, and our very own Darren McCaffrey. All right, let's, as Darren was pointing out, this could look very different in 100 days. Margarita, do you think there's a lot more at stake at this point? And is Europe at a crossroads where you have two very different futures ahead?
I've been in European politics for some years now, and I cannot remember a European election without this mantra of Europe is at crossroads. It always is, and I think it's a good thing. We should not be, I think, very dramatic as we approach the European elections. This is a big moment, is the moment of European democracy. We have to enjoy it in a way. We have to sort of project ourselves as citizens and do the same thing that we basically do when a national election is called. We have a say, we have a preference, and we discuss. And that's what I expect Europeans to do.
It is hard to not be dramatic, though, because there is something dramatic happening. We've got Brexit. This has never happened before. This kind of, the future hanging in the balance, right?
The reason, I agree with Margarita to the extent that every election, of course, will be talked about a key decision. They only happen once every 5 years, and they are. I think the reason that this one is different, or slightly more dramatic in a sense, is because the level of change, the support for change is growing so much. There has always been a battle about where Europe should go, about integration, about how deep the federalised structures, in a sense, should be. This time round, though, the we call them Eurosceptics. They're not necessarily Eurosceptics. The people who want to see Europe go in a very different direction. They are most certainly on the rise. And that presents problems for institutions like the Parliament, because in many regards they will want to fundamentally change these institutions. Has Europe got the capacity to cope with that? I don't know. It's never really been properly tested.
Do you agree, Margaret, is that the level of the rise of certain groups of people who want to see Europe in a very different direction is different now? It's much more now.
I would say yes and no.
Okay.
I would distinguish between two groups of people. There are many Europeans, many fellow citizens who have genuine concerns and worries and questions about Europe. We owe these people answers and policy responses. We have been working on many issues that address citizens' concerns for the last 4 years. Now is the moment to remind them what we're coming from and what we still can do to make their lives better. But there is another group. These people are out to destroy Europe. We can choose the term to describe them, but there is a group of people who simply do not care. They want to destroy Europe. I'm not sure that we have to spend too much time on this second group, but we have to do a lot to address the concerns of the first.
No, but isn't the problem, though, that actually they're winning at least in terms of the battle of trying to convince people? They seem to be on the ascendancy, and actually the argument for more Europe, better Europe, is being squeezed.
I'm not sure that the jury is out. It's still out there. Let's see how the election goes. And I wouldn't package these two groups together. I would also invite all people who aspire to lead the Commission and aspire to be European Parliament members to make this case for Europe, explaining Europe, not necessarily pledging more Europe. I don't think that a more Europe is the answer that fits all the questions, but we have to be able to address people's concerns and not package the ones who have genuine concerns with the ones who are out to destroy Europe.
When you say more Europe is not always the answer, do you mean the inverse could be an answer?
I think the alternative to more Europe could be a more intelligent Europe, not necessarily less Europe. I mean, there are many areas where we have to be able to show that a Europe that protects, for example, can be more effective by doing the right things, not necessarily more things. Same thing in the aspects of economy, growth. We do not have to regulate everything in the European economy, but we have to be able to address the key growth factors that make a difference for jobs.
Now, I think one of the differences this time around as well is that, you know, actually, as Manfred Weber put it earlier on today, Europe has spent the last 10 years managing crises, whether it is essentially the financial crisis and the Eurozone crisis that we saw, just under a decade ago, the migration crisis, Brexit, and that has limited, and in some ways that has changed people's views of the European Union and its capacity
and
to deal with things.
You highlight all this. Margritis, just very quickly, how, as honestly as you can answer this question, do you feel that Jean-Claude Juncker is leaving a more divided Europe?
No, definitely not. I think that Jean-Claude Juncker and his Commission is leaving a Europe that has managed to complete the transition from a Europe of polycrisis to a Europe which is standing up and fighting back. We have a new investment policy which was not there 4 years ago, almost 400 billion of real investment in the economy. We have huge trade deals with Canada, with Japan. We have more security, we have safer borders.
Isn't the problem that Jean-Claude Juncker's reign will always be remembered as the Commission president, where the second largest economy left? No, Brexit happened.
No, because we didn't vote to leave. This is not something that has to do with us. You should ask this question to the people who left. We are the abandoned partner.
Well, Darren, you have been asking questions actually around here, haven't you today?
Yeah, we've been talking to some MEPs about what they think, what are their concerns, or the concerns at least of their voters. And here's what some of them had to say when I was speaking to them a little bit earlier. What are voters telling you their big concern is?
The possible future direction of the European Parliament, but still very much around social Europe. What is still happening about quality of work, wages, etc., and what can the European Union be doing on that?
The big issue is always security, and if you talk about Croatia, then it's economy and youth employment.
first of all, I would say it is complicated for citizens to understand what we are really doing here the whole day.
What does it mean, legislative proposal or non-legislative proposal? What does it mean for me, pensioner in Latgale, the most east region of my country, Latvia?
Well, I think migration still could be an issue. Maybe economy, maybe adoption or non-adoption of the euro. Maybe it could be Brexit.
We have the question of peace and security today, again on the European continent.
People do not trust to this house, to all the three bodies of the European Union, I mean Commission, the Council and the European Parliament.
Okay, so that is what the politicians are thinking. But what about voters? My next guests here track not only election trends, but also the role of disinformation, that what this might play in campaigns. Joining us is Nina Schick. She's a political commentator and a director of data and polling at Rasmussen Global. And we have Philip Schulmeister. He's the head of public opinion and monitoring unit here at the European Parliament. All right, so we heard there what politicians were thinking. Philip, you monitor a lot of data. Can you tell us what are really the main issues that are the heart of these European elections?
Well, it's always a little bit difficult to say whether there are main issues. Yes, there are. If we're looking from a European average perspective, you would say it is youth unemployment, economy and growth on the one hand. On the other hand, it would be issues like migration, terrorism, security of our external borders. So these are the two big blocks. Climate change maybe also coming into it. But I don't think that is enough to look only at the European average figures, basically the top figures, because we see a very, very different picture when we look into different countries, when we look into different social demographics. The youth, for example, have very different interests and expectations of the European Union than what we could see by only looking at the top figures.
All right. Now, we do have to look at them. So, Nina, when you're looking at these figures, whether from a broader point of view or not, do you think that the people are looking at it more closely than they have been in the past, like if you compare it to different past elections?
I think certainly this comes at a critical time in the European Union's history. Let's not forget that since 2014, where we are now, a lot of seismic changes happened in Europe, both in terms of continued economic turmoil, but then also what I see as, the crisis that shook the European Union to its core. And I'm talking about the migration crisis. And certainly in certain parts of Europe, that has been so existential, and I think it will shape a lot of the elections when we look forward. And of course, there's the issue of Brexit. So I think that the big question on everyone's lips, and at least the headline will be, whether you like it or not, is, how well do kind of anti-establishment and Eurosceptic parties do in these elections? Because often these elections tend to be dominated, at least on the national level, by some parties who are anti-European.
Yeah, and there's actually this blurring of line between the national, as you pointed out, and on the European level. So how does this play into it? How do the upcoming elections play into national elections? Because a lot of them are actually coming up as well, in different times in the next 2 years.
They do, and this would also traditionally be something that we see in European elections over the past editions, if you want, that national issues always play a very, very large role. Are they using this as a playground, though? Are parties using this as a playground to test the waters back home, or, I don't know, a jumping ground? It is. The question very much is whether it should be. And I agree with you, of course, that let's say the populist segment or the rise of populist parties across Europe might be quite very much on the headlines when we're looking at the next month. The question is whether this should be the case, because what we see also from the Eurobarometer data is, for example, with young people, 78%, we never had such high return ever before. 78% of the young people across Europe say, my country has benefited from being a member of the European Union. We never had such a strong support. But at the same time, this is a rather silent majority that we are having, with a very low turnout.
Yeah, that does make a difference in elections, because if we look at some of the projections of how national parties are actually going to be able to do in the EU elections, the European Council on Foreign Relations released this poll last month. It's interesting because it brings up the populism aspect of this. Topping this list is, unsurprisingly, first of all, Germany's ruling alliance of the CDU and CSU parties. But here's where it gets interesting. Look at the rest of the top five. You have all Eurosceptic parties, Italy's La Liga, Poland's ruling PIS, Italy's Five-Star Movement, and France's National Rally. So these, looking at that, the top five, you have four of them who are considered populist or Eurosceptic. What does this say?
Well, in large part, again, so obviously Europe has been through very tumultuous political times in the past few years. But in large part, it's also because Eurosceptic parties tend to use the European elections as a battleground. So if you look at the United Kingdom, where I live, for example, UKIP came top of the list in 2014 because many national voters who tend to vote in national elections didn't actually go and vote in European parliamentary elections. Now, that's not true for all European countries, but that's certainly, I think you can say with confidence that there isn't a united kind of European demos.
Right.
And if you look at how the elections are run, they're run like 28 different national elections. So depending on the politics of each country, these parties can use the European elections to make hay. And they certainly will do if you look at, for example, Italy or France or all the other countries that came up that are going to have big factions projected.
And what about the role of disinformation? I mean, Nina, this is your field, really.
Yes. Well, that is certainly something that we should be alarmed about. I mean, the idea that elections can be manipulated by malign actors through the use of disinformation, I hope, is not something that is a novel idea. We saw it in 2016 in the US presidential election. We've seen it in the Brexit referendum. And I think we'll certainly see it in the European elections. And I imagine that the issues that are used in order to divide the electorate will primarily be issues of economic and also the very, 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 very difficult question of migration.
Yeah, so when it comes to the use of facts and information to convince people, what does your data tell us about that? Disinformation as well.
Well, yes, true. Disinformation is also for the European Parliament, for this campaign, a major issue for us, where we are actually investing quite a lot in order to counter disinformation, to put information out that is factually, that can be used to counteract disinformation, fake information that is being spread. So this is definitely something that will impact or might impact.
I mean, always we said that the people who are creating disinformation are always one step ahead, and I think that is the main issue. All right, well, over the next 100 days, we will be talking to you, the voters, about the issues that you think should be driving the campaign. And our team in the Cube, they've been speaking with young voters about what's most important to them. Alex Morgan joins us now with more on that. Alex.
Well, Tessa, these are four of the faces of candidates running, young candidates running in the European parliamentary elections. Fair to say, with 100 days still to go, many parties, many candidates haven't officially declared yet. But these four did get back to us in the Cube. And they've really all got a message that they want to shake things up. Let's start with Antoine. He's 26, he's French, and he's running for the Greens.
The reason why I'm running is because of the emergency of the environmental and climate crisis. And the European level might be the only way we have a chance to solve this crisis. My generation will be the one to suffer from the lack of courage of current politicians.
My generation is suffering because of the lack of courage. And we've seen, of course, these student protests across Europe. It seems climate change really being pushed up the agenda. And you've got Arba here. She is Swedish. She, again, on the left of politics, running, wanting to shake things up. This is what she sent us.
I'm running because I want to fight for freedom, for democracy, and I want to see an EU that takes the leadership when it comes to combating climate change and to make sure that we have more green and sustainable trade around the world.
Again, green and sustainable trade around the world. Marine here, now she really had a strong message about how much she wants to shake things up. Marine, she is 25 running for election.
I'm 25 and I'm running for European election because I'm tired of being represented by old white male. I want a European Parliament that represents the whole European population, a young and diverse European Parliament.
A young and diverse parliament fed up of being run by old white men. But I think the real question we're asking people is, do you care? That is a question we put to Emma here. She is in her 20s herself, and this is her answer to that question.
Of course you should care. This is a real chance to send a message what politics and what politicians you want for the coming 5 years. If we want to tackle climate change, we need ambitious politicians that set higher ambitions, firmer goals to reduce fossil fuels, to create the electricity market, to really give you the measures that we need to tackle climate change. Of course you should care, because what politicians we have for the coming 5 years will make a difference.
They will make a difference. Well, those politicians, those young politicians wanting to get involved. But of course, today on Euronews, we've been reporting that the right-wing and Eurosceptic parties are really expected to make a splash. I think one thing, Tessa, we can say is whether you're left or whether you're right, so many of the candidates declaring themselves want to shake up the establishment. So with 100 days to go, it'll be interesting to see which voices emerge from which sides of the argument, but with that that common theme of shaking things up in Brussels.
All right, thank you for that, Alex, and our team in the Cube. You mentioned the youth vote earlier, and the young people. I mean, a lot of people are trying to get the youth vote, but the fact of the matter is that they don't make it to the ballot box.
That is unfortunately a problem. I mean, in 2014, the youth abstention rate was the highest that we have ever measured. And whereas on the one hand, you would have the 75% of them saying Europe is a great thing, and on the other hand, they wouldn't move their person to the ballot box at the end of the day to vote. So this is definitely something that we have to work on. And if you're looking at these 4 topics that you just have brought, I was missing the migration. I was missing the great topics that we just talked about before, because young people are interested in other things. Look at the climate demonstrations that we're having all over Europe over the past week, run by young people. I mean, this is what interests them, and this is what we should talk about also.
I mean, I think apathy, that's another issue that has to be talked about in the context of these elections. All right, we have a lot more coming up for you on Raw Politics, shaking things up from the inside, how a populist anti-EU wave could shape this campaign and the next European Parliament. Plus, what does the man who could be the next Commission President think about it? We talked to EPP leader and Commission candidate Manfred Weber. Welcome back to Raw Politics. Good to have you with us. Now, where today we are focused on your vote, your choice, because in exactly 100 days, voters from across the EU will have their say in the European parliamentary elections. And if a growing club of Eurosceptics have their way, this place, it could look a whole lot different at the end of May. What began as a swell, Viktor Orban sweeping to power in Hungary in 2010, grew into a populist wave, sweeping across Europe, fueled by migration. In Italy, on the front lines of the migration crisis, voters elected from the fringes, the anti-establishment Five-Star Movement, and the far-right League, who formed a coalition. You might have missed it, but the last few years have seen the steady strengthening of Eurosceptic parties in both government and opposition across the continent. In Germany, the right-wing Alternative for Germany party entered the Bundestag for the first time and is calling for Dexit if its demands are not met. In the Spanish region of Andalusia, decades of socialist rule crumbled when the right-wing anti-immigration party Vox burst onto the scene. Further north in Sweden, the Sweden Democrats saw a big surge in support in last year's elections. And then there's France, where Eurosceptics Jean-Luc Mélenchon and Marine Le Pen are marching on Brussels from opposite sides of the political divide. With all eyes now on the European elections, some predict anti-EU parties could take more than a third of the seats, making this a wave that could sweep beyond the parliament come the vote in May. Well, joining me now to discuss this is Eleonora Evi, an Italian MEP from the Five-Star Movement who sits with the EFDD group. And back with us is our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Eleonora, I'll start with you. I mean, first we talk about Euroscepticism. There are those that say that Europe needs to change, and there are those that think that we should go back to the nation state, no Europe, basically. Now, your party is in the system, the very system that it dislikes. Is this the strategy? Is this the agenda of a lot of populist groups right now?
But we have never said that we wanted to destroy this Europe, and we wanted to. We are an anti-establishment political force, and this is for sure. But we have never said that we want to destroy this Europe, as we truly believe this is our house, this is our home. And today, our Prime Minister Conte, in his speech in the European Parliament plenary, rightly said that we have to give voice to European citizens that so far probably hasn't been heard so well from the establishment here in Brussels.
I mean, that's one point of view, and you're seen, actually the Five-Star Movement is seen as more on the left, and you have a lot of the, the right, the parties on the right.
Necessarily,
sure, left and right, absolutely. But I'm talking about, she said they're not here to tear Europe apart. Is that the feeling, is that the assessment that other parties are not here to tear Europe apart as well?
Well, I mean, I would suggest that some of them are, very clearly. For example, let's look at the Italian budget crisis. Clearly that was an attempt by the ruling government to break the rules, potentially, when it comes to the upper cap in terms of budget.
We keep the rules at the end.
No, well, yeah, in the end, things are in place. Look at Viktor Orban in Hungary, really stretching the rule of law, and he's under an Article 8 process. We look at also questions in Romania and in Poland when it comes to the judiciary and the free movement of press. And so in all over Europe, there are attempts to break rules. There are rules being broken, and there are stretching the limits, I suppose, of in which these countries, while being part of the European Union, can live within the structures of what Europe is.
Yeah, all right. Well, there's another group that is considered on the end, on the far spectrum, on the far right, that is. The Sweden Democrats campaigned last autumn against EU membership, so another Eurosceptic. But since then, the party has changed its tune. It now wants to send MEPs to Brussels to reform the bloc, well, from the inside. And for more, I'm joined from Stockholm by the leader of the Youth Wing and Swedish MP Tobias Andersson. Good to see you there, Tobias. All right, so what is the plan? Why the change? All of a sudden, you don't want to be. Your party does not want to leave Europe at this point. Why the change in strategy?
Well, first of all, we are a conservative party, which means that in order for us to progress, we want to view the history. We want to make sure that our decisions are correct and so on. And I think right now the most reasonable thing is to wait out what happens with Brexit and see what the consequences are for Great Britain. And I think that's quite a conservative way to look at it. And I'm also sure that we are able to, together with other conservative friends from among all across Europe, to actually change the European Union from the inside, and that's what we're going to try to do.
Well, parties in Sweden did not actually, want to work with your party, with the Sweden Democrats. So what do you mean trying to work with others? You're considered very much outside of the system.
Well, not within the European Union. We're a member of the European Conservatives and Reformists group, which has a couple of governmental parties from all across Europe. So I don't consider us to be outside of anything when we're down in Brussels. Okay. So I think we will have good opportunities for doing that.
I mean, I posed this question earlier to our guests here. What is the plan? Why do you want to be inside Europe? Is it to improve Europe, to tear Europe down? What is the strategy?
Well, we will always be inside of Europe, but perhaps not the European Union. I think it's good to separate those two things.
So you don't want the European Union to exist, basically?
Well, I want the European Union to exist, but they should focus on other things. I think for example, it's very good that we're focusing on free trade together, that we have the internal market and so on. I think it's fantastic that we can try to help each other to strengthening the security and to take action against, different kind of terrorism and so on taking place all over Europe in different European countries. I think that those are good things, but there's also things that the European Union shouldn't be doing. And we've put forward a platform with 113 different proposals on how we can change the European Union, and that will be what we're campaigning on. I think that Eurosceptic parties has been lacking a view for what kind of Europe they want, and we're trying to put forward that view, that vision.
All right. Thank you for that. Thank you for joining us, Tobias Andersson there, talking to us from Stockholm. So,
just to pick on those, interesting, and actually only Viktor Orban really publicly states this, but it is clearly the view of lots of political parties across Europe, is essentially that their view of Europe is also against a view of others, i.e. that they want to keep Europe essentially a white Christian base, and that they view the European Union as an institution or an area or a body that's undermining that because of migration, for example. And that is one of the reasons that Euroscepticism is on the rise. And even though they talk about it being undemocratic, in reality, what they're coming back to is essentially a big element of xenophobia.
I mean, what's interesting, I would like to pose this to you, Leonardo, because you said that the Five-Star Movement, they don't want to tear Europe apart. They want to just improve it from the inside. But you hear from someone like the Sweden Democrats where they don't want the European Union to exist in its current form. Is there a way to unite populists then? Because there's so many things at the core of it that they don't agree on.
But that's democracy in a way, and that's also dialogue in the higher sense of exchanges opinions among citizens and among people. And political forces also reflect these differences. Our political forces, and we as a Five-Star Movement, we truly believe in Europe, as I said, and we truly believe that we have to change this Europe. As today, those that have been supporting and pushing forward an idea of Europe are exactly those that have created a lot of damages. Think about inequalities in Europe still growing, poverty is on the rise, tax havens still exist within the border of Europe. So we have many problems we have to solve. The Council has been sanctioned officially by the Court of Justice.
Do you think the political force of the right is created, do you think that this will actually, they will be able to unite to be a strong enough force within?
Probably not, no. And I think when you've got massively disparate groups with national agendas as much as pan-European agendas who claim to be nationalists but want to work on a European platform, that there will be strains and it will be quite difficult for them to remain unified forces. On this point about democracy, it is democracy, clearly, if people vote for populist parties. No one can doubt that. However, you have to remember, in hardly most countries, in fact, can't think of a country where populists literally are the majority. And second of all, democracy is not just about 50+1. Sure. Democracy, as we understand it, is also about, yes, the will of the majority, but also balanced against protecting the minority. Sure. And in too many cases in Europe, under so-called populist leaders, the latter is under threat.
I mean, what's interesting is the view. No? Okay, go ahead.
Can I say something? This is exactly what happened at the last plenary, where the majority in the parliament tried to change the rules in order to not to have the minority then the European political groups created if they don't have a political affinity based on what we don't know. Yeah, so that's really what is happening today in Europe.
And the Five-Star Movement is called Populist, a populist group. But what's interesting is to know what the people around here think, their opinions on populism and populist groups, and you managed to get an opinion on that today.
Yeah, indeed. We're talking to Manfred Weber. Of course, he is the spokesman candidate for the EPP, which is the largest party in the European Union. Still, it would hope to remain so in, a couple of months' time with those elections. And I started off by asking him specifically about Viktor Orban and Hungary, because clearly they are in the same political grouping, and whether he and others were doing enough, essentially, to take on populism, given that he has stated publicly that he thinks that the language used by Viktor Orban is wrong.
I was voting in the European Parliament in favor of an Article 7 procedure against Hungary. That is the hardest, the most powerful weapon we have in our hands, legal weapon we have in our hand, to guarantee the rule of law in the European Union. And my party, the EPP, opened the door for the Article 7 procedure for the necessary two-third majority in the European Union to activate this procedure. But procedure means to stick to the procedure, and that's why the case is now on the table of the European Court of Justice, and we are waiting now for the outcome of this court case.
But you have the ability to take action, and so far you haven't, as the leader of the EPP.
Pardon, I activated Article 7. I don't see that the socialists do the same with Romania. I don't see that the ECR is doing the same with Poland, for example. So again, the EPP is the founding party of this continent, and I hope that everybody, socialists, liberals and the European People's Party, we assure each other that we stand on the same base on this rule of law principles, and we don't allow that anybody is taking this into question.
Lots of people are saying that this election is going to be a battle between populism and liberalism. To a degree, a battle between Viktor Orban's approach and Emmanuel Macron's. Do you think it is that battle? And if so, which side are you on?
I don't think that this is a battle. The battle is on the table for the European elections is whether you are ready for compromise or whether you are an egoist or a nationalist. That is a battle on the table. And my party, the EPP party, is the founding party of today's European Union, with Adenauer, with Helmut Kohl, De Gasperi, Schuman. So there's no doubt that the 52 parties inside of my EPP family are fully convinced about the future of this continent only with staying together. We believe in the European project and we will fight for this.
Lots of people are talking that there will need now to be an extension to Article 50. If so, should Britain be allowed to have MEPs? Should there be British representatives here in the parliaments?
To have any kind of prolongation makes only sense in the Brexit case if we know what we want to achieve in the next period of time when we win additional time. For the moment I don't see any activity, any further proposal, any further consideration what we should achieve during this additional time period. And that's why prolongation is not a priority which is at the table. And for the European elections it's clear. Great Britain decided to leave the European Union. I regret this, but that is a decision. And that means for me that for the future of the continent, of the European Union, Great Britain cannot have any more a say. That means for me that in the next European elections, Great Britain cannot participate.
And just finally, you're the Spitzenkandidat candidate. You obviously would like to be the next EU Commission President. When we look at Jean-Claude Juncker's time in office, there's been Brexit, a migration crisis, the rise of populism, the fracture of Europe. You couldn't really do much worse than Jean-Claude Juncker, could you?
I don't see it in this way. Yes, you're right. The last 10 years were a period of crisis management. The Euro crisis with a big economic impact on the daily life of the people. And then the migration crisis with millions of people who arrived in Europe. It was crisis management. Additionally, the Brexit, it was really crisis management. But that was not mainly due to the European level that we produced, let me say this. What I want to achieve is that we are getting now in a period where we close crisis management and looking for our future, to discuss about what are the next steps now, to look for projects where we can understand that together we can achieve so much, we can manage so much, we can be successful as Europeans together. So to look for positive emotions where we can tell the peoples it's good to be an European, and it's probably even a feeling at home in Europe, that you feel protected by the European Union if we stay together.
All right, Eleonora, if Manfred Weber gets a top job, do you agree with his vision of Europe and where he wants to take it?
Well, I would say that for sure the sense of Europe as a space of protection is something I can agree upon. There are many other things that I would disagree on what he said. But what I want to stress again is that as our Prime Minister Conte said today, we are part of this Europe and we wanted to change from the inside. We want to have this space of rights and
but you will fight from the inside.
Ensuring the ancient and the old rights that we have and creating new ones.
But the question is, can Europe, can these institutions, can this Parliament, can it still survive under the strain of being dragged in two very different directions?
Very different directions indeed. All right, we'll leave it at that. And now we have a lot more coming up for you. Do you remember your first time? We're talking about voting, of course. I know what you were thinking. As part of a special series, we're talking to people casting their ballots for the first time. Now, after the break, we will meet a Belgian student and find out what's inspiring her to have her say.
Yes. Stond nu 100 dagen.
100 dagen, 100 päivä. Eikä tuu myös. 100 jours. 100 days.
Kerla.
100 dana. 100 giorni. 100 dias. 100 dienų. 100 giornata.
100 dagen.
100 dni. 100 dias.
100 desi.
100 dni.
100 dni.
100 päivää.
100 dagar.
Well, that was a look at some of the voters across 27 European nations pledging to cast their votes 100 days from tonight. Now, over the course of the campaign, we'll be getting expert analysis from political contributors. And joining us tonight in the studio, we have Marietje Schaake. She's a Dutch MEP from the Alliance of Liberals and Democrats. And we also have Elmar Brok. He is a German MEP from the European People's Party. All right, 100 days to go till the elections. What are you watching out for the most?
Oh, everything. I think it is so fascinating. But, you know, there's a lot of talk of the rise of nationalists and populists, but I really think that we should also make sure that people come out to vote. The battle will really be for getting those people involved that normally do not.
Do you think it's apathy?
Well, it shouldn't be, and especially for young people, this is crucial, that they shape their own future and that they take the fate of Europe into their own hands. And so I also think it's really important to empower people, that they have a choice, that it is not others deciding for them, but that they should shape their own future.
I mean, Marietje brought up populism there, and you know, there's nationalism. In your time here, when you've looked at previous elections, do you think that populism is more mainstream now than it ever was before?
It's quite successful, but not successful that I can call it mainstream. I think the pro-European parties will get around 70% of the votes, as all opinion polls tell us, and therefore we can make it even stronger, because the young people, as Mrs. Schaake said, should go out to vote. If they would go out of vote for Brexit, then we would have no Brexit. Now they are angry that the older people decided on Brexit, and they have to see they have the power to decide for their future, and if a higher outcome, then it can be done by the young people who are mostly pro-Europeans.
Yeah, but I mean, Brexit is an example. I mean, it was something that perhaps people didn't think could ever happen, but yet it did.
Well, but it was the result of a lack of leadership. Right. Of course, David Cameron really underestimated the kind of game that he engaged in.
But it reflects sentiment as well, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And I think what you said about has populism become mainstream is actually true. I think a lot of parties that used to be in the center have been persuaded to move to the flanks, on the left, on the right, have actually taken on this kind of populist narrative about Europe and have sort of been dismissive about how important it is in a world where China rises as a global power and is really challenging us, our liberties, the openness of our markets. There are a lot of reasons, you know, climate change that we have to tackle, the impact of digitization, the question of how to manage migration in a proper but also humane way. These challenges of today ask for European cooperation, and it also means that leaders have to stand for that leadership to preserve the quality of life of our people.
So, Elmar, you don't think, because Marietje, you're saying that populism has become mainstream, you don't think so, but don't you think the populist parties know how to get the votes? They're the ones that know how to win.
Look, first of all, they are nearly in every country,
right,
with the exception perhaps of Italy. They are a minority. And we should not forget it. We should not demonize them. We should go forward to show that Europe is the instrument, is instrumental for getting challenges done, which no member state anymore can. Mr. Schaake has mentioned it. Climate change, internal and external security, migration, terrorism, a question of globalization, digitalization, where people are afraid of, to show that we all together have a chance to work for the interest of our people, that we only together have a strength to get sovereignty back for our people. And this we have to explain, that Europe is the answer, not the problem.
All right, well, getting people to vote, you mentioned it yourself, getting people to vote. Voter turnout has historically, well, it's always been quite low. I mean, what is the weak link here?
The position is that we are in a different situation, that people can become more aware that this Europe is important, that we have to explain. I think Brexit is helpful to people understand. I believe that Brexit will lead us to higher outcome. I believe also that this debate we have at the moment about the challenges. I believe that Mr. Trump and Mr. Xi and what they want to do Europe and Mr. Putin, it will be helpful to show that people, especially young people, need Europe. And I think for the first time, we get, I think, an interest that the young people take over.
So do you agree that Brexit and Trump and the new things that we see on the political spectrum actually will get people to vote? That it's a good thing?
I do think that the stakes are high. I think Brexit is a terrible thing.
It's a terrible.
But I think what we can see now, and that's an interesting development if you look at nationalists and those who were propagating Brexit and also Nexit, Frexit, Grexit, we've heard it all. They've completely stopped doing this. Now a lot of them are focusing how they want to shape Europe, and that is what is at stake. What kind of a Europe do we believe will be the most robust, will safeguard our freedoms, our hard-fought liberties, whether it's online or whether it's who you want to marry or what you want to say. We have an incredible amount of freedoms generally in Europe, but they are under pressure. And I think that people should vote for what kind of Europe they want. Of course, I'm a liberal, so I hope that people will look at what liberals have achieved and not just be misled by others who can only point out what they would do differently, but who've never held responsibility. And of course, taking responsibility means compromise. And it's not always the most sexy story, but it is an essential ingredient of democracy.
I think both of you do agree in the terms of in communicating what the message really is. But here at Euronews, we're launching a new series tonight as part of our election coverage, as we've said earlier. Now, called First Timers, it is shining a light on those who have decided to get political and vote for the first time. As we go to this commercial break, let's meet Ines Andrews, 17-year-old, a Belgian student empowered by a movement spreading across Europe.
I'm Ines Andrews and I'm from France and England. I'll be voting for the first time because I think it's not only a right but also a privilege, and also I think the European elections are important for me, being binational and having lived in different European countries. When I vote, I'll be thinking about my future and everyone around me's future and the world, because it lays in our hand. And recently at the climate change march, I realised that mostly everyone was below the age of 18, meaning that they wouldn't be able to have the chance to have their voices heard, and I think that's really important because they were at the march and they have strong opinions on the matter, so I also want to be a voice for them and be able to vote for them. I want Europe to look like a place where people can express their opinions and their concerns freely, and also be able to be a place which influences change, positive changes around the world. I think politicians should be more action, less talk, meaning that they should be more aware and caring of everything around them, because they were voted for a reason, and so they should be able to fulfill that purpose.
Welcome back to this special edition of Raw Politics, where today we are counting down to the European Parliament elections. As the campaign heats up and politicians hit the trail, we will be bringing you everything you need to know from across 27 countries. So let's dive in today with the first edition of Ballot Buzz. Kicking off his election campaign, European Parliament President Antonio Tajani. He's joined forces with a footballing trade union. It's hoped the players will help convince Europeans to get out and vote. In Brussels, Jean-Claude Juncker is gearing up. He's issued his team of commissioners with the do's and don'ts for taking part in the campaign. They must first inform Jean-Claude Juncker if they intend to participate. They must make clear they're not speaking on behalf of the Commission, but they shouldn't get carried away and miss the weekly meeting of commissioners. Paralysis, that's what one think tank reckons Brussels could be facing in just over 3 months. A study by the European Council on Foreign Relations finds that the anti-EU parties are on course to win more than 1/3 of seats in the European Parliament. Why does this matter? Well, it's thought a powerful Eurosceptic alliance could do such things as abolish sanctions on Russia, block the EU's foreign trade agenda, push back against migration. And in France, the parliament has nailed its pro-EU colours to the mast, voting to make it mandatory to display EU flags in classrooms. The gold stars will now join the tricolore and the words of La Marseillaise on the nation's classroom walls. While not strictly election-related, you've got to wonder about the timing of this move. All right, but we do have some time tonight for a raw moment. This year's election marks 40 years since MEPs were first democratically elected. In 1979, parliamentary elections were held across 9 European countries. It was also the first year Simone Veil was elected the first female president of the European Parliament. Let's take a look.
je voudrais vous remercier tous pour la grande preuve de confiance que vous m'avez donnée en me nommant à ce poste éminent.
That was a good moment. Are you nostalgic for the past?
Yeah.
No, not at all.
No, I was nostalgic for sure for a moment, but that was a wonderful parliament. At that time, we were not so many people and had nothing to say.
And that was the first.
And now it's a hard-working job here in this house, where parliament is fully fledged, responsible for legislation, for budget, for ratification of third country treaties, electing the commission. That is now much more powerful house.
All right, I'll give you the last word, Marietje.
Well, I just wanted to echo what the young woman who was a first-time voter said, and she said we need less talk and more action. And I really think that focusing on what we need to do together and people to be a part of where Europe is going is what I take away today.
All right, well, that's all we have for you tonight. Thank you for joining us here on Raw Politics, and see you again soon.